Roguelikes, a video game genre all about difficulty, procedural, level generation and permadeath. On your journey to beat a run, you collect more and more upgrades by finding treasures, or most importantly, buy things from shops. This genre is by far one of my favorites, which is why I decided to work on my own roguelike game over a year ago, and today I'm going to add its very own shop area. Caves of Umbra is a roguelike game split in two phases, the mining phase, and when you hit these monster blocks, you enter the combat phase, where you gather energy to continue progressing through the levels. So that you now know that, we can start with the stuff I've worked on since the last devlog. And if you like what you see in this video, feel free to subscribe and like, it would really mean a lot to me. To kick things off, we are going to rework something that was just added in the last devlog, the first boss encounter of the game. I got like 2 or a little bit more comments on the similarity of this boss and Coloctus from The Legend of Zelda Skyward Sword. I think you see what I mean, and it was more like a subconscious thing that happened because I'm just a huge fan of the whole Zelda series, so it turned out like the Zelda boss without me having actually thought about it just once. I don't know if it's just a thing that sometimes happens to me or if other developers can relate, so let me know in the comments. But I of course wanted to change the visuals so it doesn't look the same anymore, still keeping the boss's attacks and overall design. I kept things like the long neck, spherical body, but also integrated more of this purple theme. I recently thought a little bit more about the game's story, and this color theme is going to be pretty important as of now, so I think it's only right to add more of it to the boss designs. In terms of the boss's name, there still was a placeholder last time, which doesn't mean that this name is going to be in the final game, but for now I decided on Auronus, keeping the name theme of Caves of Umbra. Now that I've started changing the visuals, we better turn this episode into an art episode. Jokes aside, I really had to change things because you see this UI here, yet this was made 1 week in development and was never really touched since then. It does its job, but for a thing that always sits on the screen, it looks pretty bad. Instead of a simple text displaying the health, we now have an actual health bar. And instead of this weird bolt displaying energy thing, we got another bar displaying the energy. In terms of combat, we've got a few more UI elements that are also rearranged to not take up too much space like it did before. I lastly removed another one of these weird displays and created this circular meter for the dodge. All in all, I'm really happy with the new UI and also how less space it consumes compared to the old one without missing anything. Deeper into the art tunnel, I decided to work on the second area of the game, Wildwood Hollows. This is a lush and wild area, so very different compared to the abandoned mineshaft, and I first changed the way the walls look in this area, adding in rocks every now and then. Later I then created decoration elements like grass or mushrooms, so the combat phase doesn't feel so empty. I did the same thing for the combat rooms of the mineshaft in the last devlog, so it's basically the same workflow this time. With that, the rooms already look a lot less boring, but we can take this whole combat room design topic to the next level. At the moment, the game only has simple obstacles like rocks or these breakable barrels. I want to add more interesting obstacles though, and this is where traps come in. For this devlog, I made just 2 traps per area, so 4 in total, but I would definitely add more as time goes by. The first 2 of these traps are the skeleton and spike traps for the abandoned mineshaft. The skeleton one is inspired by the bone piles in Spelunky 2, where I have a chance that it contains an enemy. For Caves of Umbra, you have a better chance of recognizing if it's just a normal bone pile or trap because there's a different skull for the trap. But I can confirm that you still often run into the trap because there's too much going on, so you just start to ignore these bone piles. The spike trap is also a pretty simple trap that is utilized in many games, and it just changes state every few seconds. So I have to get your timing right for this one. The Wildwood Hollows area on the other hand has this mushroom trap that explodes into 4 bullets in a cross pattern when you're near it. After a few seconds, this mushroom also respawns at the same position, ready for another explosion. Last but definitely not least, we have the totem statue that if you get too close to it, spawns 2 tiki enemies for the small version and 4 for the big version. Once I also add more tiki type enemies, this can spawn different ones, but for now it's just these spear guys. It is shop time. So first of all, how do shops even work in this game? What do you get there? How do you pay? In Caves of Umbra, you will have shop areas that function as the transition between two areas, and most importantly are home to different shops like the Forge. This is the shop we're going to add in this devlog and where you buy weapons as well as gadgets that are formerly called secondary actions. In terms of currency, there's not just one currency in the game because of the mining aspect, but there are different resources like gold, copper, emeralds, the list goes on. With these combined, you can buy different things, so it is almost like a little crafting system. For the shop area, I had to manually put things together because it is much wider than the typical chunk in the game, and I also created the ladder block so you can climb in the shop area. For the forge shop in particular, I drew different assets like the furnace, the anvil, the blacksmith's hammer and the blacksmith itself. When animating, I wasn't just satisfied with a simple idle animation, but I added the feature that the blacksmith randomly starts to work with its hammer every now and then. I polished the forge a little more using this smoke particle system and a shader so that it looks like there's actual lava inside the furnace. And as I heard game polish, I instantly started to add more to the overall game and put the shop on hold for some time. For example, there are the ore blocks. They all look the same until now, because now we got random variants of the gold, copper and emerald ore. Or there's the bullet impact, which is now improved by this white explosion for every player bullet. Also, killing an enemy wasn't very fun or impactful. The enemies just disappeared without much particle effects or anything. So now we got enemy corpses, or for enemies like the slime, a different explode effect. These corpses will lay on the ground for some time until they finally fade away. Lastly, a very important thing are the new backgrounds in the mining phase. Instead of this silhouette style of the old backgrounds, we now have the walls fading more and more into the far, basically getting more blurry. I personally prefer the style because it makes the game look a lot more professional and less like a simple mobile game, if you know what I mean. Back to making the shop, it's now time for the shop UI. I ended up splitting the shop panel in two so that on the left hand side we got the offers and on the right there's a sort of crafting recipe where you can also buy your item of choice. After assembling the UI, I began coding the necessary system for shops in general. I designed the code as modular as possible so that when I create a new shop, I can do this without lots of programming. And for creating offers for the forge, I also had to check if the weapon is already in the inventory, but here I could easily copy the code from the treasure system that I made some time ago, when everything worked for the weapons and you could actually buy things from a shop, and then coded the gadget of a creation, and now you can buy both weapons and gadgets from the forge shop. In total we got quite some things done, but there still was a lot more, like a ton of bugs that were fixed, or the fact that gadgets now have multiple charges, but that's quite boring for the devlog, so the next steps will mainly be creating a little bit more content, like weapons, gadgets, enemies and even new shops. I think it's also time for creating a new area, but that will be a topic for the next devlog. For now, however, that is it. And if you don't want to miss these future development updates, it would mean the world to me if you subscribe to this channel. I hope I will see you next time. Cheers.